Romans 8:15 through 16. For you have not received a spirit of slavery leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by which we cry out, Daddy. Why? Remember Lo Ami, not my people? You lost your daddy when he divorced your mother. You see that? But when he resurrected, you were restored. You got your daddy back. He adopted you back into the family when he just should have just when he threw you out. You lost. And now you win again. The Spirit, the Ruach, bears witness with our Ruach that we are sons of Elohim. He canceled it out. He restored you. Thus Hosea 1, 6 and 9 says, Name her Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I should ever forgive them. But Peter, in writing prophetically, says, But you were once not a people, speaking to Israel, obviously, but now you are the people of Elohim. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And so the lesson is, if we've received that kind of mercy, what kind of people ought we to be to the other Gentiles out there? Because we don't know if they're Israelites or not. How do we know? We're trying to reach them. If you go beating up the other Gentiles out there, and you start treating them poorly, then you're following the parable of Yeshua about the slave who the king forgives him of a great debt. Then he goes and beats the fellow slaves for a tiny little stinking debt. Remember? That's you. If you don't go forgive your brother. He says, well, if you don't go forgive your brother, then I probably should just go ahead and put that judgment of adultery on you and never bring you back. I might as well not do that. And this is the story of the prodigal son in Luke 10, where Judah's really, really upset that the father is looking for his son, whom he says he was lost, but now he's found. And Judah's all upset. Would you slaughter the great calf for that? You took the best for him. Why? The father says, because my son, he was lost, but now he's found. And Judah's all terribly upset, just like they are today when you go to try to keep the Torah. They're grumbling in front of Hashem, saying, what are you doing? You're giving them the best of it. Judah's grumbling all the time about you. It's the prodigal son all over again. But if you don't show mercy, then you don't deserve mercy, plain and simple. Because you had your restoration back to him through a great exchange. So in Matthew 11, 2 through 6, it says, when Yochanan in prison heard of the works of the Messiah, he sent by his Talmudim, and he said, hey, are you the expected one, or are we to look for another? Well, who's the another? I believe the expected one is Messiah ben David, and I believe the another is a reference to Messiah ben Joseph. Messiah ben Joseph. You remember that? Have you ever heard that term? Messiah ben Joseph. Yeshua goes back and says, okay, let's talk about this. Go and report to Yochanan what you see and hear. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the news preached to them. And blessed is he who keeps from stumbling over me. Blessed is he who keeps from stumbling over me. Isaiah 8:14. In the Zohar, in the mystical writings of Judaism, in the Zohar we learn this. The Messiah will have to die, go to a higher spiritual level, and return again with the new level he has attained. In another area of the Zohar, we learn from Rabbi Abarbanel, Middle Ages rabbi, that the Mashiach will have to die in order to purify the generation. He will then wait in a spiritual state in heaven until he rises from the dead. Boy, it sounds like New Testament stuff to me. Where do you think the disciples of Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of New York got their information about a 3-day death and burial resurrection for their rabbi in New York? Did they go to the local Christian pastor and ask him? They got it from the Zohar, from their writings. So in Luke 4:16 through 21, Yeshua goes over to Gamla. I believe it's Nazareth. I believe he stood right here at this very spot, in this synagogue that I got on the screen here. That's where he stood. Almost positive. Not the Nazareth. If you've ever been to Israel, they probably took you to Nazareth in the Galilee, about 30 miles from the lake. It's not the right place. That's a Catholic place. This is the place here. It's up here about 5 miles from the lake. Gamla. Masada of the North. He stood there. And he said, the Spirit of Yudhevave is upon me because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. This is a reference to the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5. Going to the house of Israel. He sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are downtrodden, to proclaim the favorable year of Yahweh. Isaiah 61:1. He closed the book and he says, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. What was their response? Do you remember? Is this not Ben Joseph? Is this not Ben Joseph? They knew who he was. He was acting the rollout of Messiah, son of Joseph. Just what he told John, to go tell him, I've come here to do these things. He didn't come to do the job of Messiah ben David. Not yet. So you tell a Jew out there, they say, Jesus isn't the Messiah. I say, no, he was the Messiah ben Joseph. We're both waiting for Messiah ben David, you and I. Look at the writings of the very mystical, esoteric thinker in Judaism, the Malbim. From 1809 to 1879, he wrote, our sacred sages had a tradition that in the beginning of the end times would arise a Messiah from the house of Joseph who will reign over the 10 tribes. He'll wage wars, and all Israel will be gathered together under his banner, his flag, because his banner over me is love, mercy. This will continue until later on a descendant of David will appear and he'll reign over them. The Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David concept is a first coming, second coming teaching of Judaism. Don't let any of these Jews for Judaism people out there teach you that somehow the two comings, Messiah, the first coming, second coming of the Messiah is not a Jewish idea. That's nonsense. Of course it is. They're lying to you. Don't listen to them. The Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, the 18th century rabbi of Messiah ben Joseph, in his writing on the Kol HaTorah said, if Israel, meaning the Jews in his own generation, would recognize Joseph, that is the traces of Messiah, son of Joseph, that is the ingathering of the exiles, then we would have already have received a complete redemption. The redemption is dependent on the union of the two sticks, the two trees, folks. Have you ever read Ezekiel 37? The two trees, the tree of Joseph, that's etz in Hebrew. That means tree, cellulose, etz. The tree of Joseph with the tree of Judah. These are the two Messiahs, Messiah the son of Joseph, Messiah son of David. Our sages taught this. The two trees of Judaism. That's why in Mark chapter 8, Yeshua spits on the guy's eyes and he says, what do you see? He says, I see men like trees walking about. Then he does it again. And the second time he does it, he says, now I see them clearly as one. The unification of the trees, of the sticks in Ezekiel 37. Judah and Joseph. The two trees coming together. All 12 tribes reunited in the land. The marriage contract fulfilled. This is why the people of Yeshua's day said, is this not the son of the carpenter? My boss is a Jewish carpenter. He's not working in cabinetry. He's working in trees. This. He's a carpenter, a wood maker working in wood. This is the wood he's working in, right here. The Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna continued the task of ransoming captives, going back to Luke 4:18, belongs to Messiah, son of Joseph, who performs it by ingathering the exiles. The major ingathering of exiles cannot be less than 600,000. They're going to come with rejoicing and happiness. That's a link to Sukkot, the Feast of the Nations, where Yeshua says they're going to come from the east, the north, south, east, and west, from all four corners and gather in the land and sit down and recline. He says it in Luke 13:29. He's referencing this idea. He's Messiah ben Joseph. And 600,000, I think that's a small number. There's 15 million Jews of Judahites in the world. How many Israelites do you think there are? Oh, that could probably be 600 million. Maybe 1 billion or more. I don't know. There's a lot. But you're it. How else could you? Why else should you be sitting here listening to this if you were not it? Typical Gentiles don't do this. Israelites do this. They gather to listen to the Torah. You're listening to the Torah. You're of an Israelite. Now, if you're an Israelite, that means your parents and your brothers and sisters are Israelites. But they don't know it. And if they don't know it, and they don't absorb it, and they don't take it in, then they lose their inheritance. I didn't say they go to hell. I just said they lose their inheritance. They're going to be left outside. They're not going to get to come into the temple. No, it won't happen. They have to embrace this in order to take on the concept of the bride of the Messiah. They'll just be left outside to do menial tasks in the kingdom. You're going to get a better calling than them. But a better calling means you have to be a bigger servant. The greatest among you have to be a servant. Isaiah 52 and 53. In the Targum, it's all about the Messiah. Jews for Judaism will tell you it doesn't mean. It says it means it's Israel. Well, they should go back and read the Targum because they're lying to you again. The chains of your necks are broken. For thus says Yudivava, you are sold for nothing in Isaiah, and you will be redeemed without money. Peter knows that, and so he says, you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold, kesef. You were redeemed with blood. You were bought back from the dead so that you could have the marriage relationship, the gospel. We'll skip past this. This is going into the area of the Galilee. The Talmud says, in Yevamot 17a, the 10 tribes are Gentiles to all extents and purposes. We'll learn about this passage tomorrow. The Gentiles. The Babylonian Talmud says the 10 tribes were declared to be perfect Gentiles. So when you read through the New Testament and you see the word Gentile, I want you to think House of Israel Gentile. Not a typical Gentile like the normal concept is usually drilled into our brain. It's an Israelite Gentile. One who is of the physical family of Israel. Your physical descendants. I believe each one of you are. We're going to skip past that and go to this. Because Israel's Gentiles received mercy, they must give mercy to all Gentiles. We are commanded, Leviticus 19:34, to love the stranger. In Deuteronomy 10:18 through 19, we're commanded to show our love for the stranger. That's the one strange to the contract. It meant something different in Deuteronomy, but by the time you got into the first century, stranger and alien meant something different. We are to dispense true justice in Zechariah 7:8 through 11. Sounds like a Torah vending machine. Push the button and you're a dispenser of Torah. That's what you are. In the Babylonian Talmud we learn why was the temple destroyed in Jerusalem in 70. The rabbis say because therein prevailed hatred without cause, groundless hatred. They got it partly right, but the real answer is based on what Yeshua said. Remember what Yeshua said? It's hatred for Mashiach ben Joseph, who came to deliver the house of Joseph, Gentiles, from their centuries-long slavery amongst the Goyim. Because he said they hated me without a cause in his own words. And he was Messiah ben Joseph. You see that? Don't let the foreigner who's joined himself to Yudevavi say, surely he'll separate me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I'm a dry tree. There's a reference to this in the New Testament. I'm just going through this. To them, the Nokrim, the house of Israel Gentiles, I'm going to give in my house and within my walls a memorial and a name better than that of sons and daughters. Who are the sons and daughters? house of Judah. How do we know? Because remember, you were lo ami, not my people. They were never lo ami. They were sons and daughters. But when you come back to Torah, all of heaven is rejoicing like the one lost sheep on the mountain. And the sons and daughters are looking like at the prodigal son. They're like the prodigal son. They're saying, well, what are you doing that for? Giving them all the blessings. Well, you've always been with me, Judah. This is my son who's been lost. You're going to get a name even better than them because you're coming back and you were gone. You were dead. You were assimilated. You didn't know who you were. But you have to hold fast his covenant and keep his Sabbath. You have to. So the reason and purpose of the New Testament is to restore the 10 tribes of Israel to their brother Judah and restore the unity of all Israel in the land. Return from your slavery and your exile, house of Israel, for now you can. That's the gospel. That's what it is. The divorce, the death, the resurrection, the restoration, the payment of all things. You can come back now. So what are you waiting for? Nothing. Start keeping the Torah, obey the Sabbath, obey the festivals, keep the things that you're supposed to keep. Do a chicken. Do what you can do. If you're told to do something, do it. If it applies to you, do it. We'll talk tomorrow about the returning of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, the 2 houses, and we'll continue with our study in Galatians tomorrow. I'm sorry the people in Knoxville are going to miss this part of the lecture, but they can hear it. And then we're going to talk tomorrow about the book of Galatians and those nasty little things that everybody pulls out of context, like the tutor in Galatians 3, the parable of Hagar and Sarah and Mount Sinai in Galatians 4, and all that other stuff, and the curse of the law in Galatians 2, and the works of the law in Galatians 2. Boy, they just pulled it all out of context. They didn't even know what it's talking about. But you are going to have the opportunity to learn what it's talking about. And your challenge will be to try to assimilate and figure out how to boil it down and share it with someone. That'll be your job. I'm teaching you in hours of lectures, and it'll be for you to probably try to talk about it in about 10 minutes to somebody who generally won't listen to you. So I don't know. You'll have to figure out a creative way to get it into their brain. Shabbat Shalom, Laila Tov.